On this episode of Treated Table Creations, I take you through how to build this tool storage unit that fits nicely inside the woodworking bench that we built in a previous episode. Coming in at the novice level, it's pretty easy to build, and because we use plywood for the majority of the construction, good on the pocketbook. In addition, we managed a good use of milk paint and an oil finish to keep it looking nice despite all the wear and tear that a wood shop can have on a piece. I'm going to show you how to make solid drawers that stand the test of time but stay buttery smooth and leave enough room for a cabinet that can be used for light machinery such as an air compressor. I appreciate you joining me on this episode. Let's get started. Treated Table Woodworking, the YouTube station with the sexy voice and made for the one garage woodworker. So here we are. Here's our problem. Large cabinet space. If you really want to just kind of judge how much we got to deal with, use my body as a comparison. That's right. 160 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal wrapped into a 510/511 package. Don't make this weird.
Wow.
So here's our problem that we're going to make into a solution for us. Therefore, no problem. Write that down. So it is a lot of space that we can probably change into something that's better for us. Namely, in this case, we're going to make it into a shelving unit. We're going to place a lot of the instruments that we use on a daily basis for this workbench, as well as some other stuff. That's going to free up a lot of space for the rest of our shop area, therefore making it a much more comfortable and a lot more workable space for our use in the future. As I said, problem, solution, no problem. First step, break down the plywood. What you're watching me do now is create the top and the bottom pieces and the two side pieces. And as you'll see later, I do so incorrectly. Alright. So this is the part you've got to deal with because it's just not really that super. But remember, if this works out, this becomes popular on YouTube, you get paid. If you don't have a power joiner, a hand joiner works really well, and it has the added benefit of creating shavings for your daughter to play with. What we are doing is, in the end, trying to create the trim pieces here for your piece, and you do eventually have to adhere it some way, and I find that the glue and a nail gun works really well. Hand saws to trim it. All right, so now it's time to make those miter corners for the sides of the carcass. We're gonna have to make 4 of these, each one perfectly 45 degrees to make that perfect mating surface that nobody ever sees a gap with and makes it completely strong. In fact, one of the strongest joints in woodworking when done correctly. Lots of ways to make a good miter joint. Some people use a table saw, some people use a series of jigs, some people use hand tools. And even though I'm a hand tool guy, today we're actually going to try using the router. It's the first time for me. All right, so inside of our router, we've got a 45-degree bit with a guide bushing on it. So just remember, use a high-quality one from a reputable manufacturer. You shouldn't have any problems. Underneath our piece, we've got this piece of MDF, the surface that's going to ride along the bushing, and it's dead flat. So if we've done everything right with this setup, the bushing's going to ride across the MDF. The high-quality, overly expensive 45-degree bit is going to cut a nice 45-degree angle groove into here. I'm going to be really confident with this, and nothing will go wrong. What did go wrong was an unsteady hand, so we did have a little unevenness. The fix was, of course, using the given edge guide, and now we have evenness. Perfect 45. The hold fast. Very common in most woodworking shops, especially for those that use hand tools. It's my show. I like hand tools. We're going to use them. Expect to see the hold fast a lot. But you're also going to see them in just a lot of workshops in general because they are so effective. However, there is a limitation with their use, especially for our purposes, since we're trying to fill a negative cavity underneath the workbench with some useful storage. The bar from the holdfast or any of those families of devices extends below the workbench top and into the well that we thought we had unlimited access to. And now we have to limit the height of our storage unit to make sure that it never interferes with the travel of any of these devices. Hopefully that makes sense. What you're watching here is the step-by-step process on how to create a channel to insert the back piece. What I did here is just 2 passes over a table saw, which created a relief that I could later go over with the chisel seen here, which created an even bigger channel. Easy to do with plywood. And then here we're just marking the depth necessary to go over it with a router, and now we have a rabbet joint. Rabbet joint is perfection here. Super strong, super simple. Marking out the areas that we're going to be using my festool domino for, which creates a mortise and tenon. So then you have a mortise and tenon and a 45-degree miter combo, which is a super strong joint to glue with. Not shown here is that I did do a dry fit prior to this wet fit that you'll see with the glue. I do recommend you always do a dry fit. Despite this, you'll notice I am struggling a little bit. This is a rather big piece, and if you do have a friend, I'd highly recommend using him or her. I did not at this time, and be honest, what you're seeing on my face is frustration, wishing I had a friend helping me out. Every woodworker likes to show off perfect 90-degree angles. And I don't know why I made this mistake. And it's why I probably made the mistake. Write that down. I was going to be using slip tenons via the festool domino, thereby making those 2 pieces an integral part of the carcass strength and also serve as mounting points for the drawers so I could have 3 banks of drawers. Yeah. But because I went ahead and made that mistake, because again I wasn't thinking, and glued this all up and was really ridiculously happy of how well it went to bed and woke up and realized my mistake, we got to do something new. New in this case is creating data joints matched on the top and the bottom to create a groove so that we can create rabbet joints with the separating panels and insert them. Just use a piece of plywood on both the right and the left side so that you can get them equal distance from the sides, both the top and the bottom. And then using your router bit should be pretty easy. In this case, it actually worked out really nicely. All you're seeing me do here is use the table saw to create the rabbet joints with the dividers. They ended up looking pretty slick if I do say so myself. A little bit of glue and a little bit of muscle and they should pop right in. So easily so that you might be confused as a woodworker that this works so darn well. As seen here. So yeah, there's a lesson learned here, and I don't know really what it is except that mistakes will happen. And we recognize them, we fix them, and we move on. And we don't tell anybody about them. Unless you're on YouTube and you tell everybody about them. All right, the carcass has been made, and now it's time to make some drawers. If you're truly efficient, you would have made these drawer pieces the first time you actually got out the planer. I'm not that efficient. If you do decide to make some drawer fronts, this is the time to do it. Here I am doing so with a piece of cherry that I have, and once again getting out the hand saws because, well, I like hand tools. In this completely unnecessary exhibition of my skills, I wanted you to see the drawer fronts and how they could be stacked on each other because I am awesome with hand tools and, well, they can stack nicely on top of each other. That's about it. Welcome to the Word of the Day, a segment of this video where we go over one word that the younger generation is used commonly today in their language and that you should never at any time use in yours. The purpose of Word of the Day is simply to explain one word that you can now better understand why your offspring are using them or some of their friends are using it incorrectly and in some made-up term that in 5 years nobody will remember why they actually used it in that way whatsoever.
The word of the day is sus.
Sus, in this case often used as an adjective or a word used to describe an action or a noun. Example, that person's hanging around somebody of ill repute. Yep, that's sus. In this case, that sus should be heard by adult members as, yep, that certainly is suspicious. As adults, sus can actually be used once or twice in a given week without too much hemorrhaging from your offspring. Using it more than this will result in hemorrhaging from your offspring. So drawers. One thing to make them well, very much a different thing to make them operate in the environment for which you're putting them in. In this case, it's a wood shop and we're going to have lots of dust. Now, if you buy drawer slides from any reasonable operator, they come with the risk of starting to gum up over time. And drawer slides are not cheap. They come in about $20 a pair for the most economical model, upwards of $100 for some of the more ones with the bells and whistles. So you're talking a lot of money when you start adding up all the drawers we have here, and that's not the intent of this build. So I wanted something economical and bulletproof. Traditional technique is to create a groove here with the matching male component. Now I'm going to show you how to build that, and after 18 months, I'm going to tell you it operates just as well as the first day that I used them. I'm not going to spend too much time having you watch me make the pieces, but I do want you to understand that once you do have cut the pieces to length and to width, that you do need to size them to make sure you actually have what you want. Trust me on this. What you're observing here is a technique because I lost the ability to use my router table to create the grooves for the sides of the drawers themselves. So what I did was I just actually created the outlines using the table saw and then used an actual router without the benefit of the router table to create the grooves themselves, finishing up with the shoulder plane. I hope you have a better method to do this because it took me a while. And then of course this using the festool domino to create the joinery for the drawers themselves created a really strong joint. My son helped a little bit. You know, enough to get paid for this segment. I got some feedback that said that I'm not spending enough time showing you how to glue things together. Well, here you are. I'm gluing some drawers together.
How do you tap it where I can see it?
I hope it's entertaining watching me glue drawers together. If not, give me some feedback that you say I'm spending too much time showing you how to glue things together. Business academics would call this being a good parent and a good manager all in the same bit. And I would agree. I am teaching my son a life skill, but also reminding him that being a manager is nothing more than just pointing out the flaws and doing nothing to help out. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed a difference in the building materials for some of my drawers. All of them are using plywood for the drawer base. That's deliberate. I wanted something budget conscious, bulletproof, and stable, and that is plywood 3/4 inch, hands down. However, for the drawer sides, I used something different depending on which drawer I was using. Half of them use solid pine and half of them use plywood. I wanted to see, after normal wear and tear after 18 months, which one would be better to work with this type of drawer slide system that we talked about. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't make a difference. The plywood is performing equally as well as the solid wood. There is no difference. So if you're a traditionalist, I'm going to say your solid wood is still working. Don't worry about it. And it does look better. If you're budget conscious and that is not something that concerns you, plywood will work and it will work just as well. So with this system, figure out who you are as a woodworker. Personally, I'm an equal opportunity kind of guy. I just use what works best. Using the power planer helps make the slides universal, which is probably the only really important thing with this type of joint. The parts all really need to be uniform. Use a hand plane as necessary just to fine tune a little bit. Whittle down the slides just inch by inch just to make sure they can fit into the grooves you created with the drawer slides. And you'll appreciate life so much better when they just go in and out so easily. Pre-drill the drawer slides. Always pre-drill. And here's the finished product. Well, how do we get to the finished product? The answer is, drum roll, spacer blocks. Simply place the spacer block on top of the previous drawer and then countersink, always countersink, drill the actual drawer slide on top of that spacer block. Use the same spacer block on both sides and you'll get a real even fit and a nice reveal. Do it once or twice and you'll be a pro. Now, putting on the drawer fronts for the top pieces or any of the pieces really can be used using this technique of double sticky tape. The playing cards are just to make sure that you've got real even spacing. If you use the same set of playing cards and the same number of playing cards, you're going to get the exact same space between all the different drawers. Watching me use the hand plane to fine tune it is just an obvious example of superior craftsmanship. What I'm not showing you, and I wish I had, is that I actually screwed in the drawer sides from the inside of the drawer to make sure they stuck tight. What this here is the creation of a template for each one of the drawers to actually put in the drawer pulls themselves. Put the template on, drill in the same place every time, and that creates a nice place to put your drawer pulls that makes sense and looks very, very professional. Which you are. A professional. All right, so we're at that point of the project now where we can either take this beautiful piece that we made and even make it that much more beautiful, or we can completely torque it up. Have no fear. For this, let's just remember the purpose of this piece, and that's going to make which coatings to choose and how we apply it just that much easier. So let's just remember what this piece is for. It's going to be a work piece in the garage. It's going to get dinged, stuff's going to get dropped on it, perhaps some solvents and glue. We are not looking for a grand piano finish. That doesn't mean it has to look bad. But we're going to pick finishes that help this piece age well by making it actually look more intentional and better, even with a few dings and a little bit of history behind it. Also, let's look at the materials we choose. Now, the purpose of this piece was to be very, very functional, but also budget friendly. If you remember that, that was the intent as I laid out at the beginning of this episode. Let's start with this plywood that I picked. It's not budget basement in that it's very, very solid and it's going to do good things for us. However, the grain pattern's not that attractive, and if we just applied a coat of oil, we're not going to be impressed. Solution: milk paint. Now, I could go into milk paint quite a bit. It's one of my favorite things to use, especially when I know the piece is going to have a hard life. As it ages and gets dinged, it actually starts to develop a patina that actually makes it more attractive. Patina is kind of like a middle-aged man with a woodworking hobby. It just gets better with time. So we're going to use this. It's easy to apply, and if we ever want to go over it again in the future, we can, and it's going to look just as good. So we are trying to hide the plywood in this case, so we are painting it. The drawer fronts, different story. Boiled linseed oil. So for those that know your coatings just a little bit, you know that boiled linseed oil doesn't offer a lot of protection. So why are we using it in a workshop where we would think that we want protection for our drawer fronts? Well, you have a point. However, go with me here. Boiled linseed oil will go on really, really easily, and if ever we do have an offensive piece that got so scratched or a solvent wore off so much of it, you sand it down a little bit, reapply, and it looks exactly like the rest of the piece, i.e., highly, highly repairable. So don't kid yourself. In the workshop, you're going to ding your piece, you're going to put some solvent on it, and that completely just destroys the coating, no matter what you choose. So I'm going to pick something that's really easy to repair for the eventuality it's going to happen. The other reason I like this is that it allows the wood to get those tannins activated, like the species of cherry here. So over time, the cherry is going to get more red and expose a lot more greens, blues, and yellows, i.e., the same thing that's going to happen with the milk paint is going to happen with our cherry. It's going to develop a nice, deep, lustrous patina. Well, how are we prepping our surface? In the case of milk paint, not a whole lot of action going on here. You just need to go over and get rid of the deep gouges on the plywood with some 120, don't overdo it, and move on. It doesn't require much more than that. For the drawer fronts, a little bit more work involved. I'm going to go all the way up to 210. Now you can go farther than that and you're going to get a lot more shiny, glossy surface in the end. However, again, we're in a workshop. I want something that after a few coats of boiled linseed oil is applied, I'm going to get more of the wipe-on matte finish. And that's just, again, with the dings and the scratches, it's just going to start to look better and worn in. It's going to look nice. That's my thought process anyway. You do you.
Milk paint's fairly easy to do. You just half and half, milk paint, half water. Seems to work out really well, at least in the high states of Colorado. Just lather on. What you're not going to watch me do is do 2 coats, but, well, there's 2 coats. Wish I could make this more entertaining, but we are just watching paint dry. Give a quick sanding with some 200 grit between coats, and it's going to look really sharp when it's all said and done. And as I've mentioned on videos, what I really enjoy about boiling linseed oil is the amount of careful measuring you have to accomplish. Not really. You just apply it on and wipe off the excess. No careful measurement required. Now it's time for the final moment when you're going to be successful and you're going to have that bourbon at the end of the day. Until you realize that that panel saw at Home Depot may not have been perfectly calibrated and your decision to not double check its measurement didn't result in what you needed. And you hate life for that moment. This is not acting, this is actually me being pissed off. I was thinking about this. Now the solution and the fix actually occurred within an hour of each other. What I did was I just actually cut off a 1/2 inch using my circular saw, cut at 45 degrees. I wasn't happy to be doing this, but really there wasn't anything else to be done unless I wanted to trash everything and start from the beginning. That's something I would have done for a client, but for myself, screw that. This is me after gluing back on the side piece, a little bit of paint, a little bit of glue, a little bit of sanding, and you really cannot tell that this ever had actually occurred. I would recommend you actually avoid doing this step and just measuring it twice and cutting once the first time. But if you don't, this is a possibility for you. Second attempt. Will it work? Will I be happy? Or am I just going to get pissed off again? This, ladies and gentlemen, is the look of a person who's happy. I'm just putting on some beeswax on the insides of the drawer slides. It's going to guarantee that it's going to be a really nice, buttery, slidey action for the remainder of its lifetime. Finally put it on those drawer pulls that we had talked about earlier. And I cannot tell you just how good this felt.
And here it is, the finished project, right where it's supposed to be, about to get filled with some tools that have been laying around my shop and that need a home. That's its function. It's not an heirloom quality piece of furniture. It was never supposed to be. It's supposed to be a piece that's going to get some dings, it's going to get some love, and it's going to get used for its purpose. Its purpose being that of helping this wood shop become organized and much more functional. With that in mind, I really wanted something that I can enjoy looking at every single day and get a little bit of enjoyment every single time I used it. So here we are, back where we started, just taking another look at the final product. Again, thanks for joining me today. And I really hope you get some inspiration to do something like this in your workshop. Just remember, this is a template. It's not the must-have you must do. If you need to change it to make it more germane to what you want or to how you enjoy woodworking, please do so. But if you do that, just go ahead and send me a pic. I would love to see what people are producing out there, and I can learn from that as well and be a better instructor. So if you did enjoy watching me build this, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'll be happy to show you all the future pieces that I end up doing and share some of that enjoyment that woodworking can bring. Until then, thanks for joining this video and watching this piece be built. I hope you have a beautiful day, and please, no matter what you do, enjoy woodworking and embrace it as a hobby.